Hey, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. At AFN, our fundamental belief is that change is where opportunity happens. Best way to find opportunity in change is a network that's diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. The fireside chats that we have are meant to help us gain expertise from industry mavens who've spent a long time in their particular roles so we can learn about what they're doing. Today, we've got Nancy Drees with us. She's founder and CEO of Vacare Group. Her company's been around for 12 years. They are consulting and service for talent acquisition, employment branding, and recruitment. They fill a niche for growth companies who need broad experience and that are trying to scale quickly and in an appropriate way. And they look at both technical and non-technical roles. Nancy, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So we'll cover a bunch of different questions as we talk through. But first and foremost, I'm really interested, what does Vacare mean?
Yes, it's a very interesting story. So when I started my business, so my background, I worked on the agency side of recruiting for a long time, and agencies can have a little bit of a bad stigma around it. So when I started my
Yeah.
business, I really wanted to be very consultative and relationship driven. So I wanted to pick a name that didn't sound agency like. So I started to
Okay.
think about all of these words that would be meaningful, that I would be helping people, building relationships, and so forth. So I came across Vacare, which is a derivative of a Italian and a Latin word, and basically what it means is vacancy. So we're filling a void in companies that don't have that infrastructure, and so it seemed to be very fitting. So that's where it started. Everyone always thinks it's my
Awesome.
last name. It's not.
It's a cool name and like unique and like you can remember it.
Yeah.
So just thinking really broadly about things right now, uh, what do you think about the market for hiring? What's it look like in general for
Yeah.
companies that are looking for folks?
It's really interesting because I talk to a lot of people every day and a lot of companies looking to hire, a lot of candidates looking to find employment. And I think the perception for a lot of folks hiring is that there's all these big layoffs at, these larger tech companies. So it shouldn't be so hard to hire people. They're under the impression they can post an ad and, get that talent that they need. What they quickly find out is that those layoffs don't necessarily hold the candidate pool that's going to be the right fit for your company, whether it be skill set, size of company, culture fit, or whatever. So I think there's a misconception that there's a lot of people on the market, but when companies start to look to hire talent, they realize quickly that it's not as easy as it might have been perceived with hearing about all these
Sure.
big tech layoffs. Um, I think it's also very uncertain in terms of, anytime there's a political change, the first Q1 is always, do we want to hire? Is my industry going to be affected? So Q1, I saw that a lot. I think it's starting to open up quite a bit and companies are starting to be more aggressive with hiring now, but it's competitive and people think it's only competitive usually in tech. It's competitive in every
Okay.
industry right now.
Is there any area that you see a particular shortage of people, like above and beyond?
Mhm. Yep. So I would say that the major one, and I think it's a result of the market in general, but also the up and coming industries. So we work a lot in climate tech and clean tech, and there's definitely a shortage of qualified, talented people. And it's really for two reasons. So many people are mission driven and they want to get into that field.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
competitive. And secondly, a lot of it's really new. Things like direct carbon capture is really a new concept. So there's not really a talent pool of people that can, plop into a
Okay.
job. It's transferable skills. So I think the combination of those two, sales is always super competitive to get. You can get a salesperson, but you can't, get that top performer. So
Sure.
it really
Sure.
requires, direct sourcing. So yeah.
Okay. And one more question around this,
Mhm.
just because as we're thinking about AI being in the news so much, when companies are looking for folks, uh, any role really, what are they putting in around AI in the job description for folks that they're looking for?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, and one that doesn't necessarily work in recruiting for a couple of reasons. Companies are using AI to automate application processes and maybe have a candidate, record their interview. They don't have to take time, they'll save time and things like that. Candidates don't want to take the time to do it. So you're losing out on
Okay.
a big part of the job market. The second piece is that the companies, and I think they find this out after the fact, who are using AI, it doesn't it doesn't account for that human factor and that cultural fit, and so it
Sure.
is a lot of. I think there's a lot of good that can come out of AI in certain ways to automate process, but when it comes to hiring people, it gets a little difficult if you try to completely automate that.
The companies that you're working with, are they asking for AI skills of the people they want to recruit for?
Yeah, even in industries that surprised me. We have hardware companies that you would think they want people that have straight hardware engineering skills, but
Okay.
everybody is looking for somebody that maybe has touched on AI because they're trying to figure out solutions in their own
Yeah,
business
yeah.
to implement that.
Okay. Makes sense. So when we think about someone coming into a company, that this is a big decision to add anyone into your organization. How do you define what a successful hire is for someone coming in the door?
Yeah. So traditionally, I think companies measure how a successful hire is on, how long they stay, and things of that nature. A successful hire starts before that person even works for the company. It starts with, how are we attracting people? What's our message? Do we have a culture that we're promoting? And are we providing a solid and positive candidate experience for candidates during that interview process, whether or not they end up coming to work here? Because
Okay.
that's what defines and shapes your employment brand, and word gets around very quickly if they're providing bad experience, they're ghosting people, things like that. The onboarding piece is vital, and a lot of companies don't do that very well. So
Okay.
really having a plan for onboarding, I always recommend that you put in place a buddy plan or a mentor plan where somebody is paired up with somebody in the company, so they always have that person to go to with questions, so that they feel very supported. And then performance management, really from the start, setting, here's what our expectations are for the first 90 days, reviewing those, giving constant positive or constructive feedback, and really communicating and also being transparent with those candidates when you hire them. You will retain them if that's the case. Sometimes you retain people and they're miserable and you don't know it. A successful hire is knowing that somebody is happy in their job, they're enjoying the people they work with, they're passionate about what they're doing, and they have opportunity to continue to grow in their own personal journey.
Okay. So a lot more nuance than just thinking about how long I'm having them on board.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Um, so when you've got companies out there, they're companies who, maybe some in some sort of startup stage, maybe in a growth stage around them. As we said, bringing people into your organization is a big deal overall. How should a company make a decision on outsourcing recruiting or, really any sort of function for that matter? What sort of way would you recommend folks look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from personal experience. I have a small organization. When I started, it was just me, and I tried to do everything. And I quickly found out I'm not good at everything. I don't like doing everything, and so I really, really took a look at, where am I effective? What do I enjoy that I know because I enjoy it? excel at it, and what are the tasks that I don't have the expertise in, I don't have the time to do, and I just don't want to do. Because accounting, for example, I would put it off, keep putting it off. So that was my
Sure.
first thing. I said, okay, like this
Okay.
needs to get off my plate, right? So I think it's looking to say, what do I want my function to be? And if that doesn't include hiring, marketing, finance, then look for a trusted partner. And then it's the question of, am I big enough and do I have enough work to build that internally? And do I have the funds? Because it can be expensive to build an internal department. Or should I look for somebody that has that expertise that I can trust? And our slogan is, we build your team while you run your business, right? So
Okay. Okay.
when you want to build your business, you go do that. We'll find you the people to help you do that. You want to build your business, you find a marketing firm that will promote it so that you have sales. That would be my,
Right.
look at what you're good at and what you're going to excel at, and then figure out the rest, and who the trusted partners are.
Okay. Um, and when you think about like the ROI around this for organizations, I think it's pretty easy for you said like, hey, am I not enjoying it? And is it outside of my expertise? If we've got like, hey, I might really enjoy doing the recruiting part, but I'm not that good at it. How do you actually help people come to the understanding is just like, hey, when we're looking at the ROI, what are you best at? Do you have to help walk people along the path to get to that decision?
I do. Um, and I think it's, if if I hear that people they enjoy interviewing people, and they think that that's what good at recruiting is, posting
Yeah.
jobs and interviewing people, I find myself having to educate them that that's not really recruiting. Recruiting is a repeatable process that requires time intensive outreach tools, and take a look at, do you actually have the time to do this? Do you have the tools to do this? And most of the time the answer is no. So there's a way, if you really enjoy recruiting, we can create a recruiting culture in your organization, and we can set up referral programs, and you can definitely be involved in all of the interviews and so forth. That there's ways to be involved in a certain discipline that maybe you're not taking on the whole function, and you're
Okay.
taking guidance from an expert. And that's the most important thing, is that you're open to that guidance.
That's great. So when we think about organizations, they might say like, "Hey, I'm going to hire my own recruiting team." How should a company make that decision versus being able to use outsourced recruiting organization?
Yeah. So typically, when I hear that, my conversation with my client will be, I want you to do what's best for your company, but here's some things that you need to think about if you take that approach. When you hire you probably start with one recruiter. Do you have enough work for one recruiter? Do you have too much work for one recruiter? So maybe you hire two,
Yeah.
right? So that's the first thing you need to look at. Then, and you need two recruiters right now because you have to hire 20 jobs. Are you going to be hiring for 20 jobs consistently? Or is it going to
Okay.
go 30, and then you don't have the capacity, that your recruiting team doesn't have the capacity to keep up with that? So that stalls hires, which slows business, which affects your bottom line. Or are you going to go down to 5 jobs, and your recruiter is going to sit around and not have enough to do, and now you're paying the salary, that, and which is wasting
Yeah.
finances. So I always suggest, our model, and I'm not saying me particularly, but the model of outsource is very scalable, where you can control the cost, you can control how much is done, the resources, and you also don't have to build the infrastructure. If you want to hire an internal recruiter, you're going to have to get LinkedIn Recruiter, which is going to cost you a lot of money, and you're going
Okay.
to end up spending likely more money unless you're at that point where it's consistent hiring at an increased pace every year.
Okay. Well, and growth companies, a lot of times, like their time horizon is, let's just say, not, it's variable. But when we
Mhm.
think about being able to have that distance of time saying like, hey, I can see being consistent. We're hiring 20 people a quarter for how long? What sort of time frame do you think they ought to be able to look at and say like, hey, I have confidence. Should it be 18 months or 2 years? Like, how would you give guidance around that?
Yeah, if it was a company I was working with or talking to about potentially working with, I would. I'll take it in both ways. If you have another solution and you say, okay, I think we're going to be consistent. I would encourage you to build your team internally, and if you're working with a partner, to not have it a black and white stop. Right, transition.
Okay.
We help our clients. Our biggest success stories are when our clients don't need us anymore and they do have to build that internal team. We hate to see them go, but we also know that we got them to a point where they're stable enough and they've hired the right people that now they have to build that, right? So if you're working with somebody, that's the point, but make it a smooth transition. Um, if you're not working with somebody and you are thinking about it, I still would potentially find a partner that has the expertise that could help you build it,
Hmm.
and also supplement that team while they're getting up and running. I've worked with a lot of clients that wanted to do that, and I functioned as kind of the director of recruiting. I got all the recruiting
Okay.
hired and
Yeah.
trained. So hire somebody who can hire the right team so your team is
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, even if you're starting out with two recruiters, you probably need someone who can manage them, who can ask the right questions.
Right.
Um, so when we think about, you've got an outsourced recruiting firm that you're working with, how can the organization that hired that outsourced recruiting, how can they be the best possible partner to make sure that they're getting what they want out of the bargain?
Yeah. So the most important thing is communication. So whenever I talk to a prospective client, they always ask me, how much is it going to cost me? How long is it going to take? And I walk them
Yeah.
through our process on what we're going to do to find you people, what we'll hold ourselves accountable to in terms of the number of people we're going to present to you every week. How long it takes and how much it costs you from there really depends on you. So
Yeah.
when I send you a candidate, if you're working with a sense of urgency, you're making yourself available to not only talk to us, but talk to the candidates immediately and interview them. You're ready to follow up. You're ready to move quickly. That's what really makes a good partnership. And above all, being collaborative, being forthcoming about your challenges, and providing feedback. So we want to, sometimes the why not is much more valuable to us than the why you would like
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
So providing that feedback as you begin to interview people, or at the start, if you know that, but really being very collaborative and communicative, and really having that partnership, and viewing us or any partner as really a part of your team and somebody you're relying on for expertise.
Okay. And you kind of covered both sides of the coin there in terms of thinking about this as a partnership overall. But when we think about accountability for an outsourced recruiting firm, what do you think is the best way for an organization to hold that recruiting firm accountable for what they're hoping for to get out of it?
Yeah. So I think a lot of companies, because companies are used to using the staffing agency model that provides kind of that 90-day guarantee or whatever it is, that they guarantee. That's always what the question that I get is, oh, what kind of guarantee is it if
Yeah,
this
yeah.
doesn't work out? That's not the way to hold the partner accountable. The way to hold the partner accountable is to talk through realistically at the beginning of the search, how are you going to go about it, and how am I going to have transparency into what is success and how are we defining success. So
Okay. Okay.
with my company, we have a portal that we give all of our clients access to, and it shows them everything that we're doing, every candidate we've reached out to, where they are in the process. We have time trackers to show them, where, what we're doing every second of the day. And we set up weekly calls and give them the feedback. We say we hold ourselves accountable to presenting to 2 qualified candidates a week that we've pre-screened that you can consider to interview. If we get to week 3 of the engagement and you haven't interviewed anybody, we're going to pause because there's an issue with either what you're expecting in the candidates or our understanding of the profile. So we make sure that there's touch points, and a company should make sure that they're if they see that things aren't going the way they want and they're not getting what they
Right.
want, pause and communicate that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then thinking about the difference, you've talked about like the standard sort of recruiting firms that are out there and 30-day guarantee and things like that. What sort of pricing models do you see out there, and what are you finding to be particularly effective for organizations?
Yeah. So there's your standard contingency model that we talked about. It's a fee-based model, and you'll pay, a percentage of the salary. So any hire can cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $70,000.
Yep.
And that comes typically with the guarantee. The guarantee, quite frankly, is not long enough for you to judge whether or not the person is going to make
Sure.
it. So usually that expires long before you find out that the person's not going to make it.
Right.
Then there's the retained model where companies will pay a third of a dollar sum amount up front, and then the rest of it upon success of hire. That's a risky model because unless you're really confident with your partner, you've already given them a big sum of money up front.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
And they don't fill it, right?
Okay.
I've seen retained searches go on for a long time. I've stepped in and, they wasted a lot of money on a retained search, and then we came in and hired the person. And then there's the consulting model or RPO model. Recruitment process outsourcing is what that stands for. They're very, very similar. The RPO model typically is an hourly rate, and the consulting model is an hourly rate. RPO is strict recruiting, going out and finding people. The consulting firm is going to get more involved with your talent acquisition, your process, your system implementation, advising on, how to build a positive culture and candidate experience, your social media presence. So it really depends on your budget for recruiting. Agencies are going to be the most expensive and probably the least successful.
Why?
Because agencies create competition for their clients. So they take a candidate and they shop that candidate around to multiple companies. And then because they work on commission, they
only care if it gets hired by one firm.
The highest salary, right?
Yeah.
The retained search is probably and this is obviously my opinion, but the second most risky. And I've worked in all these models because you're upfront giving money, and and you don't know if that's going to go anywhere. And the hourly model is much more scalable, controllable, and cost effective. We save our clients 50%, if not more, off of the cost of hire.
So you guys specifically do the hourly model then?
We do the hourly model. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
If someone came to you and said like, hey, we'd much rather do the retained search, for whatever reason, we're saying that's not good, but if is there flexibility on your part for doing a different pricing model?
So if you asked me that 10 years ago, I'd say, sure, I'll do anything.
Okay.
But no, because we have tried to mold our model to accommodate the business. And so now, and it hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked because it's not what we do. So just like anybody else, if you were selling something, you were selling this and it only came in this color, and then your
Yeah,
clients,
yeah,
oh, but I want to have it like with stripes on it, and you started to try and do that, but it cost you a lot of money to get that ink, and but you wanted the
yeah,
business.
yeah.
It doesn't work. So we turn away business quite often because they want to change
Okay.
the model, and it's not good for the client. It's not good for us. It's not gonna work.
Right, right. So if someone said, if they're working with another recruiting firm and they're like, hey, we only do the retained search model, and they said, hey, we'd rather do hourly basis on this, what would give them red flags on responses around that, do you think?
Yeah, we'll do that, but you'll need to pay us for the first 20 hours that
Okay.
you're going to put into it, which would be my guess on how they would do it, because
Yeah,
that
yeah, okay.
some
Then
sort of,
it's still retained search, really. Yeah.
and I've had people that I've clients that I've worked with that, our model didn't work for them, right? We started with
Sure.
them, they weren't being responsive, they weren't giving us feedback, and we were losing candidates. Just too much time went on. And I had the conversation. I said, listen, I really think you should go with an agency, because that way when you lose candidates, you haven't invested any money, right?
Yeah,
Because,
yeah. Okay.
so it depends on what works for you, and how invested you're going to be in the process.
Sure. Sure. Um, Anything else is worth thinking about, like how we look at, let's say, negotiation with a recruiting firm? Like, what is on the table um,
Yep.
to turn the dials on?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is the cheapest model is not always the best model.
Okay.
But I think all things are negotiable. And I think if you have hesitancy working with whether it be any one of those models, right? The
Yeah.
hourly, the contingent, the retained, um, asking for, hey, this sounds really great. I think you guys, I think that you guys can do it. I just have never done this before, and I really want to try it, but the price is like really a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
to
Right.
swallow. Is there some sort of either introductory percentage of a fee, introductory rate that we can work together so that
Okay.
you can show us what you can do? We will do that. We'll give people a 90-day introductory rate so that they can see how successful we are.
Yeah.
And a good retained search would say, yeah, we'll only have you put 5% down instead of 25% down in the beginning. A contingent firm would say, okay, our fee's 30%, but we'll do it for 18% for the first hire so we can show you.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask for
Okay.
negotiated, because
It's fair to get used to each other a little bit.
absolutely.
Okay. Good deal.
Okay.
All right. So as you're an entrepreneur, you're out there in the space. I would say that there is a interesting amount of uncertainty that we see in the news out there in the world. What are you looking forward to for the rest of 2025 for you and for Vacare?
Yeah, so we're super excited about really continuing to explore different industries. One of the coolest things personally, and I think everybody on my team really, really loves about our jobs, is that we get to work with so many different cool companies. I never thought I would know so much about direct air capture or about cooling technologies for data
Yeah.
centers. So we're always super excited and curious about new technologies, new business models, new services,
Yeah.
and being able to promote those, especially in the market. And we always say we're the biggest cheerleaders for our clients. Like, we will make you look good. We will brag about you. So we're
Yeah.
excited to explore some new opportunities there. And, we're attending a lot of different concerts. I'm not going to any of those, but conferences that to really explore what's up and coming in the market and what's
Cool.
exciting candidates.
Yeah, you guys get to see a lot of innovative stuff. I guess one question related to that. So a lot of the companies that you're dealing with, you said they're growth companies, they're likely to be raising capital.
Mhm.
Do their investors ever ask to talk to you guys to understand the talent acquisition strategy?
100%. And we're always very glad when that does happen, because we do need buy-in from them as well,
Okay.
right? So, and then we also get an understanding of their strategy and how we can make our client look good to their investors, what they're looking for.
Yeah.
We work with a lot of VCs that constantly refer us to their portfolio
Okay.
companies.
Great.
So yeah, so we do that all
Very
the time.
cool.
Yeah,
Okay. Awesome. Well, Nancy, this was incredibly informative for me. A lot of good knowledge around this. So really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
my pleasure.